Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Jaya Radha Madhava Radhe, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Alright. Good morning, everybody. Hare Krishna. Hopefully you are all doing well today. So today we are going to be reading from the fourth canto, Creation of the Fourth Order, chapter 24, entitled Chanting the Songs Sung by Lord Shiva. And we'll be doing texts 78 and 79 today. This will be the conclusion of this chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet Nasta Preswa Bhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. Okay, so I think we'll read the first one responsibly, and then I'll just read the second one. Okay. Idamya kaya uttaya Pranjali Sadhayan Yanvita Shinu Yachtra Vayan Martyo Muchyate Karma Bandhanai Idamya Kaya Uthaya
Idamya kalya utaya.
Pranjali sadhayanutaha
Pranjali sadayamrita.
Senu yajstravayen martyo
Shriyastravayan martyo.
Muchyate karma bandhanai
Muchyate karma bandhanai.
Hiramya kaya uthaya
Idamya kalya utaya.
Pranjali sadhayanutaha
Pranjali sadayamrita.
Senu yajstravayen martyo
Shriyastravayan martyo.
Muchyate karma bandhanai
Muchyate karma bandhanai.
Bol
Idamya kalya utaya.
Hiramya kaya uthaya
Pranjali sadayamrita.
Pranjali sadhayanutaha
Srinu yastravayan martyo.
Sunuya Savayan Martyo
Muchyate karma bandhanai.
Muchyate Karma Bandhanai Idam Yakalya Uthaya Pranjali Sadhayanutaha Sunuya Savayan Martyo Muchyate Karma Bandhanai Idam Yakalya Uthaya Pranjali Sadhayanutaha Muchyate Karma Bandhanai
Idamyaha kalya utaya.
Idam Yakalya Uthaya
Pranjali sadayamrita.
Pranjali Sadhayanutaha
Yastravayan martyo. Yastravayan martyo. Muchyate karma bandhanai.
Muchyate Karma Bandhanai Anyone else? Okay, word for word. Idam, this prayer. Yaha, a devotee who. Kalye, early in the morning. Uthaya, after getting up from bed. Pranjalahi, with folded hands. Shraddhaya, with faith and devotion. Anvitaha, thus being absorbed. Shrinuyat, personally chants and hears. Sravayat, and gets others to hear. Martyaha, such a human being. Muchyate, becomes freed. Karma bandhanai, from all kinds of actions resulting from fruitive activities. Okay, translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. A devotee who rises early in the morning and with folded hands chants these prayers sung by Lord Shiva and gives facility to others to hear them certainly becomes free from all bondage to fruitive activities. Please repeat after me. A devotee who rises early in the morning and with folded hands chants these prayers sung by Lord Shiva and give facility to others to hear them. Certainly becomes free from all bondage to fruitive activities. Purport. Mukti, or liberation, means becoming free from the results of fruitive activities. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.10.6, Muktir hitvan yatha rupam. Mukti means giving up all other activities, being situated in one's constitutional position. Swarupena vyavastitahi. In this conditional state, we are entangled by one fruit of activity after another. Karma bandhana means the bonds of fruit of activity. As long as one's mind is absorbed in fruit of activities, he has to manufacture plans for happiness. The bhakti yoga process is different, for bhakti yoga means acting according to the order of the supreme authority. When we act under the direction of supreme authority, we do not become entangled by fruit of activities. For instance, Arjuna fought because the Supreme Personality of Godhead wanted him to. Therefore, he was not responsible for the outcome of the fighting. As far as devotional service is concerned, even hearing and chanting is as good as acting with our body, mind, and senses. Actually, hearing and chanting are also activities of the senses. When the senses are utilized for one's own sense gratification, they entangle one in karma. But when they are used for the satisfaction of the Lord, they establish one in bhakti. Okay, 79. Gitam mayadam naradeva Gitam mayadam naradeva nandana parasya pungsa paramatmanastavam japanta ekagra dhyastapo mahat charadhamante tata apsyate psitam. My dear sons of the king, the prayers I have recited to you are meant for pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul. I advise you to recite these prayers, which are effective as great austerities, or as effective as great austerities. In this way, when you are mature, your life will be successful, and you will certainly achieve all your desired objectives without fail. Purport. If we persistently engage in devotional service, certainly all our desires will be fulfilled in due course of time. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 24th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Chanting the Song sung by Lord Shiva. Om Magyana Dhamarandhasya Ginanjana Salakaya Chakshu Amritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamaya Dadati Swapadantikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandha Jagatpate Gopasa Gopaka Kanta Vrahakanta Namosate Tatta Kanchana Ghorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishvano Sudadevi Pranamami Hare Pure Vancha Kalpatarubhyasa Kripa Sindhavya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnaveva Namo 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 Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pasatare Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhu Bhara So many great things in this last two verses right here. So we'll just start off with the first one and really dive in to the meaning of the purport behind this one. So one of the main stresses within this purport is karma and bondage to it, and liberation from such bondage to our activities. So this reminded me of a few verses from just the Bhagavad Gita. So in Bhagavad Gita 3:9, Krishna says, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. So there's three types of karma. There's actual karma. Generally, when we think of karma, we just think of that implying all, and we do use that as a wide term, but karma within itself also refers to pious activities. And then there's vikarma, which refers to activities done against like scriptural injunctions, things that are not to be done, forbidden activities, so like sin. And then there's akarma, which means there's no reaction to it at all. Is a negation, so there's no reaction to such activities. So to follow up with this, Krishna then says in 3:31, Ye me matam idam nityam anu tishtani manavaha shradha vanto nasuyanto muchyante dipi karmabihi. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruit of actions. So Krishna gives us what is to be done and what is not to be done through the scripture, through Shastra, through the Bhagavad Gita itself. Krishna explains so many things that you should and should not do. He explains the three modes of material nature. He explains so many things within this short conversation on the battlefield. And he's given us various scriptures as well. So how do we actually know that we're doing this correctly? That's a big thing, because I could read all this knowledge myself and assume I'm doing it right, and I'm doing a karma. I'm not creating anything because I've read it, therefore I know it. But actually, Krishna stresses that we need to find a guru. We need to have someone within this knowledge that can properly show us how to apply. Because it's one thing to know it intellectually. A lot of times we can intellectually understand something, but when it comes to the practicality of knowing this knowledge is a whole nother situation. And that's the important part, is the practicality. So within our practice, within any practice, we have three checkpoints or three fact checkers on what we're doing and are we doing it correctly. Guru, Sadhu mean the saintly persons, and Shastra, the scriptures. So we should make sure that our activities are in line with these three things. If one of these things are off, that we're getting our information from, we at least have two other fact checkers to make sure that what we're hearing is correct. So if your guru is saying something against the Shastra, like, it's not so bad to eat meat and all that, and he doesn't follow up with something to actually prove that, or you got sadhus telling you a whole nother thing that your guru is saying is not right and the Shastra is saying is not right, then you know that they're speaking falsely. So we have these fact checkers for a reason, to keep the knowledge pure that we're receiving and that we're applying to our day life. So Prabhupada goes on to talk about the fact that, as he states right here, actually hearing and chanting are also activities of the senses, and mentions them as devotional service. So we probably all by this point, everyone in this room has heard from Srimad Bhagavatam 7:5-23, where it said, Shravnam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Parasevanam Archanam Vadanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. So this means that Shravanam, hearing, Kirtanam, to chant about the Lord. Vishnu Smaranam, to remember the Lord. Parasevanam, to offer service to the lotus feet of the Lord. Archanam, to worship in the temple, like with our deities or deities at home. Vandanam, to offer your prayers to the Lord. Dasyam, to act as a servant of the Lord. Sakhyam, making friendship with the Lord. Atma Nivedanam, to unreservedly surrender unto the Lord, to give your all to the Lord. So these 9 parts, these 9 processes make up the 9 basic processes of Bhakti Yoga, how we relate to the Lord and how we can serve Him. And practically all services fall into one of these 9 categories. So even something as Shravanam and Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, are an act of service. And this is actually the first 2 mentioned in here. And if you're doing these 2 things, then Vishnu Smaranam becomes easy. Remembering Krishna becomes easy because you're constantly hearing and chanting about Him or glorifying Him. So in this age, we are told the process of God realization and self-realization is the chanting of the holy names. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Kevam Kulao Nastiva Nastiva Gatiranyatha. This age of core hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. There's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. Now, why is this repeated 3 times? There's no other way. Nastyeva, no other way. Why is this? This is because it stands for 3 different things. The way of karma, the way of doing fruitive activities, is not going to give you deliverance. It is not going to make you understand God. You're not going to get anywhere with this, especially in Kali Yuga. The next one, there's no other way, means that jnana, the act of philosophically speculating, is not going to help you understand God. How many people do we know out there are constantly trying to philosophize about the whole world, how it came to be, why we're here, and all that? And how many of those people even come close to understanding bhakti, to understanding that God even exists? And if He is, does He got a form? And if He does, then what's our relationship with Him? How many people really get there? And jnana is definitely not going to get you there in Kali Yuga. And then the last one, so we did karma, jnana. Next one's yoga. So doing your meditations and stretches, all these things for mystic powers and such things are not going to get you there. The farthest you're going to get is going to be likely Paramatma realization. But even then in Kali Yuga, how practical is that? You only got so many years. You start off with 100,000 years in Satya Yuga, 10,000 years in Treta Yuga, 1,000 years in Dwapara Yuga. You only got 100 years in this Yuga, in Kali Yuga. But how many of us even reach 100 years generally? A lot of people die young. There's even people dying in their 20s and 30s on a constant, sometimes younger. So hearing and chanting, if you chant the name of the Lord, you will know the Lord, because the Lord is not different than His names. And you'll be purified by this chanting. You hear it from a pure devotee, and it has even a more immense power. More immense power. Because the name of the Lord, being non-different than Him, can be compared to the association with a rod and a fire. This is a common thing Prabhupada mentions within his books. If you put a rod in the fire, and you leave it there, it becomes red hot. And then if you go to touch something with it, what happens? It burns because it has adapted the qualities of the fire now. It is basically fire itself. So depending who you're associating with, you're going to adopt those qualities, whether good or bad. That's why oftentimes we say you should have sadhu sangha, not asat sangha. In the Nectar of Instruction, it mentions that we should give up worldly-minded people. Janas sangha, we should give up this association because it will affect us. But when we're associating with the sadhus, and when we're especially associating with the holy name, which is non-different than God, the purest of the pure, then what's going to happen to you? You're going to adopt those godly qualities. You're going to be purified. You're going to be able to come to a higher realization and a higher version of yourself in this life, and be able to understand and have a relationship with God. And all practices, at some point or another, they mention the chant the name of God, and that that God is not different than his name. You go to practically any tradition in ancient times, it will mention this. Whether it's the Quran, the Bible, native tribes, wherever you go, they have this idea. Nowadays, it might not be so much pushed forward, but previously, it was mentioned just like we mentioned. So, going more into this, Prabhupada mentions using your senses in Bhakti Yoga. Now, this is a simple and important process that we must understand, because oftentimes when people try to understand on a deeper level and try to understand God, they think, since I'm not this body, I'm not these senses, I have nothing to do with anything, so they close everything out and just stay in. So I should have no activity, I should do nothing because I am just a soul. But they go more personal with it. They don't understand that a soul has a personality and a soul has these senses as well. A soul also hears, also sees, also all these things. Because God has to have this. Because if we have it here in this material state, why would God not have it? That means God is not complete. That means he is incomplete. God has to have both personal and impersonal to be absolute. Just like a coin has to have a head and a tails to be an absolute and complete coin. So he has to have both of these and put them in one. Otherwise, it's dualistic. You cannot have something that God does not have. Otherwise, you're calling him fallible. God is infallible. So, since he has these senses, that means in our spiritual form, we also have these senses. It's not that we don't have them, it's that we misengage them. We don't know how to use them. You have not purified your senses. So, in Srimad Bhagavatam 9:4:18-20, I'll read the translation of this. It talks about Maharaj Ambrish. So Maharaj Ambrish always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna, his words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temple, and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavana. He engaged his senses of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi offered to the Lord. And he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasada. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord. 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaja Ambarisha never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service and various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. So, as we can see, he engaged every aspect of his senses into the devotional service of the Lord. Every aspect. Now, we could take inspiration from this. He gives so many different examples on how can we come to a platform of engaging these senses. Because if you do not engage them, they're going to engage you in things that you likely don't even want to do. How many times do people end up doing something and then afterwards being like, I wish I would not have done that, because they let their senses control them? Or they're like, I wish I could stop doing this, but I can't, because their senses are in control of them. They do not know how to engage these senses, and so therefore their senses engage them. But when you start to engage in this process of bhakti yoga, you start to engage these senses in devotional service, then these senses become satisfied. The Lord will help you overcome so many things. Even oftentimes heavy addictions people have, they could overcome it by taking up this process. It may take some time, but if they're sincere about it, Krishna can fix that for you. Or he'll set up things in such a way to fix it for you. So engage these senses properly. Learn how to engage these senses. If you want to see something beautiful, look at the deities, look at pictures of Krishna. You want to smell something, smell the incense offered, the flowers offered, the tulasi offered to Krishna. You want to hear something, hear Krishna Katha, some kirtan. Just find a way to engage these senses. This is the way. Because even if we look at many impersonalists or voidists that try to cancel out everything, sometimes they fall down, and they fall down hard, because you could artificially renounce everything. You could artificially renounce so many different things, different types of foods, various types of sense gratification. But oftentimes we'll also see that they cannot maintain that for long periods of time. At some point, they end up falling down because they do not know how to engage it properly, and they become dissatisfied. They become dissatisfied of it, because you went from the only type of happiness and bliss that you knew of and experienced to negating that bliss and happiness that you experience. Although it's only a drop, because if you're engaged in devotional service with Krishna, then you actually experience the bliss. You actually experience a whole load of happiness. But when you have never experienced that, and all you experience is this little bit, and you negate it, you're going to fall back into this at one point or another. So we should know how to engage it and experience the bliss, because this is actually part of the eternal soul, Satchit Ananda, eternality, knowledge, and bliss. So person who understands Brahman, they understand that I am eternal. This does not mean that they understand God necessarily, and this does not mean that they understand Paramatma, but they understand that I am not this body. And then you got Paramatma realization. God is within each and every living entity, cell, so forth, atom. But this only gives you knowledge. So you may have knowledge, and you may have the fact that you're eternal with this. And this is often what, as far as many different types of meditators and yogis come to, are one of these two. But for a devotee, they got Bhagavan realization, God realization. So God is his own person. God is within everyone, and everyone and God himself are eternal. So with this God realization comes the bliss. So you experience bliss, knowledge, and eternality. You get the full spectrum. Whereas a person who's a great Brahmavadi or Mayavadi or Voidist, Shunyavadi, they may go to the Brahmajyoti, the Brahman effulgence, and they may experience eternality and just existence. But because they don't have engagement of what the soul is completely, they don't experience the bliss, they just experience shantas, they just experience peace. They'll fall down at some point back into the material world because they have not understood the soul fully. They understood part of the soul, but they don't understand that it has this other feature. And how do you get that other feature? You understand, you get that by knowing God. And what does that come from? That comes from knowing your position, your Sanatan Dharma. Dharma is your intrinsic nature, something you can't take away from it. So water is wet, fire is hot. You can't take these aspects away from these things. So the soul, its aspect is loving service to the Lord. And we can see this in even in the material condition. We're always serving someone. We have this service attitude. It may be to our dog, our family, our country, our nation. So many different ways we may be trying to do it. Even in the animal bodies, we see this happen. They take care of their children for some time, or they're like a dog, they serve their master. There's always a service attitude somewhere or another, because that's eternally part of the soul. Sanatan, eternal. That's the one thing that never changes. This is not a religion. This is Sanatan Dharma, the eternal occupation of the soul that we're teaching. So when you realize your Sanatan Dharma, the fact that I am eternal loving servant of the Lord, that changes up everything. Now you know who you are and what you're supposed to do. Otherwise, if you do not know this aspect, you're going to be lost. You're not going to know what to do in life. Because even if you exist, okay, even if you know that you're not just nothingness and you're just going to exist as such, and you realize you're going to have activities, what do you do and what is the purpose of life? What are you supposed to do? When you realize that you have a relationship with God and there's a reciprocation there, that changes up everything, because now it's okay, there's a lover and a loved, a beloved and a beloved. So we must learn how to relate with the Lord. How do we come to knowing the Lord, and how do we learn to show our love? Love is a verb. Love is not just a noun. Love is a verb. It's an action. It's what you do. I can say I love you all I want, but if I'm treating you horribly, I'm calling your names, I'm beating you, I'm doing any of these things, obviously I don't love you. But if I'm trying to serve you in every way I can, even if you aren't asking for it, and even if it means I'm doing things I don't want to do just to make sure you're happy or that you're taken care of, that is love. And God's doing that for each and every single one of us. Krishna is doing that for all of us. We don't want to know him, so he gave us this material world. We wanted to be our own God, and when we came here, he gave us the body of Brahma, so you could be like God. You could have that experience of being God. You could create your own world. You could be in control of it. But we suffer. He does not want us to suffer, but we suffer. And we keep neglecting him as much as he tries to show his way. We neglect him. And he allows that. He keeps fulfilling your desire. If you don't want him, you don't have to have me. Because that is love. He's going to do what you want, even if it's not what he wants for you. He only wants the best for you. So when we finally come to realize Krishna, he paves the way for you. He teaches you these things. He gives you a bona fide spiritual master. That way you could apply this process. That way you could come to understand who he is and how to come to him, how to love him. How does one act on the platform of the soul? Because so many people say they're spiritual, okay, but how does the spirit act? What makes you different than any other person out there? That's an important point. What is what makes what you do different than anyone else out there in the world that's not spiritual? Are you still doing the same old things, but you just read spiritual texts? Or are you actually doing something that's changing everything you do in your life? From the way you wake up, the way you take care of yourself, the way you think, the way you interact with others. What is it that changes you from everyone else? So, by doing so, everything will be fulfilled. Everything will be fulfilled. Both Lord Shiva and Prabhupada mentioned in the last text that I read, the last text of this chapter, that if we persistently engage in devotional service, certainly all our desires will be fulfilled in due course of time. So if we follow this process, all things that we need necessary, we should not have to worry. Krishna will fulfill it. As Jesus says in the Bible, God is even providing for the birds and all these animals. So why not you? And especially if you're trying to serve him directly, you're trying to come to know him and show him your love, why would he not take care of you in all aspects that are necessary? And he'll fulfill your desires. I mean, we've experienced this so many times. You've probably either maybe you wanted a certain type of prasadam and you just got it that day, or maybe you wanted this book or something and someone just gifted it to you, or so many other things that have just came to you. Now, we don't want that. That is not the process of bhakti. We do not want our desires fulfilled. We want to fulfill Krishna's desires. Because this is not a business transaction with the demigods. This is a reciprocation of love. We fulfill Krishna's desires, and even without us wanting to, in order to reciprocate with us, he wants to do the same for us. So if we desire Krishna, and we desire to know him, and we desire for things to line up in such a way to be able to do this, he will fulfill that desire every step of the way. Anyways, I think this is a good time for questions or comments if anybody has any before prasadam.
Thank you.
In the beginning, you quoted the Bhagavatam, another quote, or was it from the Nectar of Instruction, the Archana and all the processes?
That one's in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Can you recite the shloka?
Yeah, I used to have this one memorized. Shavnam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Para Sevanam, Achanam Bandam Dasya, Sakyam Matma Nivedanam. This is 7:5:23.
9 processes of devotion.
Yeah, 9 processes. Okay, any others? Ananta Prabhu?
It's about fruit of activities. What was that?
There's 2 I read. The first one was from 3:9. I just quoted the first part of that, which is work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in the material world.
I'm talking about these verses today. For today.
Oh, today's
There's some
verse.
discussion about fruit of activity. I was trying to remember.
So the first verse is a devotee who rises early in the morning and with folded heads chants these prayers sung by Lord Shiva and gives facility to others to hear them, certainly becomes free from all bondage to fruitive activities.
Yeah. So it reminded me of earlier in this canto, this business of Daksha and Lord Shiva. And it's just kind of interesting that Daksha, he cursed, I don't know if he cursed Lord Shiva, but he berated him so badly. And then the leader of Lord Shiva's group, as I remember it, cursed, he said, Daksha will soon get the head of a goat. And then he cursed all the brahmanas, and I think pretty much everyone there, because they didn't stand up for Lord Shiva. And he said, his curse was, you will forget all your spiritual attainment and return to fruitive activities. That was his curse.
Wow.
Which means you'll be in the path of birth and death. I thought that was an interesting curse. I don't know.
Real curse.
Huh?
That's a rough curse.
Yeah, don't make the 10 offenses. Vaishnava Aparad is the first and most important and serious one to remember. Okay. I think that's all. Okay, thank you so much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shiv Prabhupada ki jai.